Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
So welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Another week goes. Getting towards the end of August now. Soon the politicians will be back. We'll have more and more to talk about, but we still have plenty this week to talk about. And where the best start, as you know, on this podcast for several years now, and not without the amount of attacks and abuse we've had, we've been saying what we need is unity of the movement. What we need is a constitutional convention. What we need is a plebiscite election every election. And we've been shouted down quite a lot, but it was quite heartening this week, Phil. I saw this, that some of the branches of the SNP have put forward a motion to the conference. And that's exactly what they're actually saying, all the things that we've been saying and we're getting roundly attacked for, is they want to have a constitutional convention. They want to have a debate on it at the party conference. My question to you is, do you think that'll even reach the conference floor?
No, I don't, but it doesn't matter, because if it did get to the conference, it won't be implemented, because bear in mind, at conference, the vote has been taken off the people by the SNP leadership, done by Angus Robertson. So even if it does, and no, first of all, I applaud it. We 100% agree with what they're doing. But even if it does make some headway, it cannot be implemented when the leadership group in the SNP is standing in its way. Given that they are compromised by being in the pocket of the very establishment the motion is designed to remove. So the leadership of the SNP is captured. We know this, right? Be it through blackmail, bullying, or bribery, or just self-interest, or a mixture of all, by the British state, which knows very well how to play this game, perfidy salvi. So we need to stop playing by their rules. We know that. The game is rigged, and the good people, very good people that put this motion forward, the good people in the SNP are right to push it. But know thine enemy, friends. Whomsoever resists this motion is an enemy of you in the SNP that want independence, and they're also an enemy of the people of Scotland. Now, we've seen the rise of smaller parties like ours, Alliance to Liberate Scotland, who support a plebiscite, but lack popularity because most people have never heard of the small parties, the small fish, because we don't get the media coverage that the mainstream parties do. And here's this classic dichotomy I always talk about: populism versus principle. Stay in the game, or fight your corner and rally around the flag for independence. and this, there's only two parties in this game right now that actually have any leverage, and it's SNP and the Greens, who are supposed to have independence at their core. We know why SNP have lost it. What about the Greens? Well, obviously I know Ross Greer quite well because I worked with Ross, and many of us did when he was recruited by Yes Scotland to be the communities coordinator for Yes Scotland, and he did a fine job. Good guy. He's a Christian guy. He's a principled guy. The problem I have with this, though, is like the SNP, they've got this philosophy: you've got to be in it to win it, i.e. stick with a party that's focused on retaining power instead of freeing the people. That's a tough one. But when, like the SNP, it's been over a decade of procrastination, no further forward on Indy, then it's time to stop and turn around and start marching towards independence again. So this is a call out for all of the people just below. I mean, where does Flynn stand on this? We know Stephen Flynn. I know Stephen Flynn as well from Aberdeenshire, in Aberdeen. He is an accomplished politician. He's a smart guy, but is he captured? Because we need people who are not captured, who will actually run and that we can rally around and support. I believe Ross Greer is not captured, and there's others in the Green Party that are not, that could make a significant part in a game and play for a plebiscite. And I just hope they come to their senses and band together and have a revolution within both of these parties, because both of these parties, the Greens and the SNPs, are not going anywhere at the moment when it comes to independence, because there are too many obstacles in their way.
I don't know, Ross Rea was captured. I think they'd probably quickly release him if they had captured him. He's definitely a catch and release quick. Eva, I mean, we know that there's a whole long road to actually get a motion to any conference. You have to get a branch who wants it, and they get another branch who are going to, second the motion, and then it goes to the conference committee, and the conference committee then decides which motions get in front of conference for conference to decide. Now, we know there was 43 rebel branches last year, the SNP, who tried to get unity. I don't know how many are back in this motion, but do you think it will see the light of day at conference?
I think this is a question of who blinks first and how respectful of or afraid from the membership in the branches the leadership actually are. Because it's one thing for the leadership to have a very tight stranglehold on the processes, but it's something different if the leadership are persistently ignoring the wishes and the aspirations and the democratic will of the members of the party. So we knew last year that those 43 branches had substantial support. Despite that, they lost the vote on their amendment, and their amendment in essence was to say that for the Holyrood election, every list vote for an independent supporting party should be counted as a vote for independence. And really what they were saying was like ourselves and others, that could have been the de facto referendum in May 26. So if they're looking at something similar this year, the leadership need to be afraid from the members, and the members need to be adopting the carrot and the stick attitude towards the leadership. And it's very difficult for them to do that because of the way that the party constitution is now stitched up. And also because there are so many members who either won't be able to get to conference or are unfortunately apathetic, or some are still trusting in the leadership, that when it would come to a vote from the floor on any such motion, you can bet your bottom dollar that the leadership will have all their folk lined up and turned out as they did last year. You could go round last year's poll, which was, very, very pitiful attendance for such an important event compared to what you used to see in SNP conference halls in the past.
Yeah.
You could go around the hall and you could identify before the debate started what way certain people were going to vote, because they were there for themselves, for the party, and not to promote the interests of Scotland. So we're in exactly the same Groundhog Day again this year. But I think before we perhaps rush to judgment prematurely, I think it'll be interesting to see what comes out of today's SNP National Assembly. That's happening in Perth, and I see that what it's advertised as is a meeting of National Assembly from 11 a.m. till 4 p.m. The theme of the day will be a discussion around the opportunities for pressing forward the case for independence and for additional powers following on from the party's historic victory earlier this year. Now, if you unpick that, the historic victory earlier this year was historic insofar as, yes, the SNP remained the biggest party, but it was very sad because they lost seats and they lost a lot of votes. So it was only historic in the terms of being the biggest party. What it did display quite plainly was that ongoing, continuing, probably increasing gap between support for the SNP and support for independence. Now, the other angle of the National Assembly is it's described as a discussion around the opportunities for pressing forward the case for independence. A long-winded way of saying that they're throwing a bone to the members by looking like they're talking about it, when the SNP leadership, the members and the people in the movement all know that there are a number of ways that you could advance the cause for independence overnight. One is the Angus Brendan McNeill plan, and the other is the Constitutional Convention, and the third is the informal moves that there should be amongst leaders of constituent parts of the movement to draw it all together and to create that unity of 2014, but build on that. And none of these things are in the pipeline. And if they're not going to be in the pipeline, then the SNP will either stand or they'll fall, and they may end up falling on their swords come conference time if the members who are determined to proceed with their motion either lose the motion or the motion doesn't hit the conference agenda. So it's worth the watching, because we're in different territory from where we were a year ago with the SNP. They've won the election, it's under their belt. They know that this time they are expected to deliver because they are in the last chance saloon. So there's everything to play for, but it'll develop slowly, and any concessions will be dragged out of John Swinney and those around him. They'll not be given willingly, because they're holding on to that grip of power by their fingernails.
But here's the thing, Terry. Since from 2014 to now 2026, approximately 22, 24 conferences. Never once in that time have the SNP debated actually the core raison d'etre of the party, which is independence. In fact, we know that when Angus Brendan was still in the SNP, as was Chris McElvenny, when they tried to do it, they were booed at the stage, which was incredible. They were moving to talk about independence, and the hall were booing at them. And it's kind of what Eva was saying. Will the payroll and others, even if it does get to the floor, will they pull this down?
I think that the raison d'etre of the SNP is not independence.
Well,
I think that is the raison d'etre of the people who support the SNP, the people who believe in independence and go to think that the SNP are the way forward because they're the big party. The SNP are not actually interested in independence because it means they have to do something. They have to actually work at it. They can't just keep saying, oh, Westminster, Westminster, Westminster. Oh, we're moribund by them. We can only do this or we can only do that. Also, the SNP, this is such a bright idea, isn't it? A plebiscite election, and they've come up with that by themselves. Really? It's amazing. I remember talking about this when I was a member of the SNP, which is, well, I left it over 10 years ago, but that's beside the point. Talking about it then, talking about it every year since, we all talk about it constantly, and now the SNP are suggesting that it'd be a good idea to consider it. But they're not going to consider it. As Eva says, it will not reach the conference floor, and if it did, it will be stood on. There will be all the plants in the audience there to make sure it doesn't go through. This is a sop. This is yet another sop. This is another carrot, another promise to the public who want independence. They're saying, oh, this is how we're going to do this. All the branches are for this. Let's go for it. But it's interesting that it's the branches that are putting this idea forward, because for a long time they have been so stuck in what the SNP are about, what they want from the SNP and what the bosses say. And it's lovely to see a wee bit of rebellion going on. And the more rebellion we get, the better. I think that through rebellion, we would see changes to the SNP, not in their actual structure or the people who are in there at the moment. They need out, and we need the rebels in order to make things happen in Holyrood. That's my opinion.
Here's the thing. Let's be devil's advocate for a minute, Phil. Let's suppose it does get to the floor of the conference, and the conference overwhelmingly votes for this motion. Describe, so the people know what we could be achieving if this motion goes through and the unity is called the Constitutional Convention, all those things. It would make a huge difference to the political outlook and landscape that we have just now, which is in neutral.
Yeah, I couldn't get to the button quick enough, so not fast enough on the draw. Yeah, do you know what? If it does get to the floor, I just think we're wasting our time, Because, sorry, we're not wasting our time by pushing for it, because the only thing we will achieve with this is outing those who stand in its way. And because when you think it's something that really, really resonated with me, what Eva was saying there, think about this. Seriously, think about this. Angus Brendan McNeill and Chris McElhenney, okay, booed at an SNP conference for putting forward a motion to take us towards independence. If you booed, if you support the persecution of these two guys and the witch hunt that followed, if you support the SNP's continued refusal to implement the will of the Scottish people, and remember, it's what we want. They're supposed to do what we want, not what their masters tell them to do, which is to get us independence. On my profile, I've got a quote from Orwell, and it's on my Facebook. I think it's on my Facebook profile. And those who vote for corrupt politicians are accomplices, not victims. So if you're voting for an SNP that are actually refusing to implement your will, what are you doing? What are you doing? And the difficult thing here is we need to unite around something, and that's the problem, because it goes full circle. There are enough people, and there's plenty of people in the SNP and the Greens in different parties, or just in no party, who want independence. But where do we rally? Where's the rallying point? All under one banner. All these other initiatives that have come up, like IFS, like Scotland United, like the Yes Movement. These are the organisations that are not political parties, but around which we can find like-minded people and talk about this and try to organise ourselves to face the right direction. That is what unification looks like. Unification is rooting out. The problem is we need a vehicle. We need a political party that stands clearly for independence, nothing less. But we need it to be one of the. We need to bring on board or force the SNP and the Greens to take the lead on this, because everybody knows about the SNP and the Greens. Everybody thinks they know that the SNP is a party for independence. Well, it was, not now, which is why I know that this will not go anywhere. The only thing that this can achieve, and I applaud you and I support you, is to oust those of you who booed Chris McElhenney and critically Angus Brendan McNeill. Those who booed, give yourself a shake. Think about it. You were either plants from the Brits working for the establishment, you were working at the behest of the leadership that sat there and didn't boo them, but told their mates to boo. That's the problem we've got. The quislings from within. And it's that classic quote that I'm not going to do again, but it's the Scottish people that lack imagination, or those that are bought and sold for English gold, that are the problem here.
Yeah, it was definitely, in my humble opinion, it was the top table who set up that the booing would start. They had their child soldiers in the audience that started it all. It was disgraceful. Eva, as I say, let's be devil's advocate. It gets through conference, and you know, John starts picking up the phone. Tell the people what could happen.
Tell the people what could happen if the motion is passed.
Yeah, and John starts picking up the phone and pulling things together.
Well, can I start off on a negative point? The conference approved the question of the convention that Keith Brown announced. They weren't asked to approve it because he announced that it was happening. So that was not a contentious motion. It was a grand reveal from the leadership, yet again, that there would be a convention. So we're a year further down the road and the convention has not yet been birthed. It's going to become the longest pregnancy in Scottish political history. So that hasn't happened, albeit that was an agreed position but imposed by the leadership. So if that machinery is not yet functioning, then the prospect of the leadership actually getting to grips with and acting on the instructions of the members at conference are probably less than zero. However, if John Swinney and those around him are in fact Democrats, and if they care about the mandate given to them by their members, then they would just sit with a wee notebook and pen and a couple of spads and check out the phone numbers and the email addresses of those people within the movement supportive of independence who have something positive to contribute to A, building the campaign, and B, creating the electoral event, and C, creating as much publicity domestically and internationally as possible. And what you want to do with these things is that you want to energise and enthuse the population who support independence, but you want to encourage those who are on the cusp or might have thought about it but aren't so keen because they've seen less than competent government at times in the last few years. So there's a lot of work to be done leading towards the absolutely necessary democratic electoral event, that building on the notion and the understanding and the cast iron certainty that Scotland is a sovereign nation and entitled to the right of self-determination. That electoral event has to be created, managed and controlled in, by and for Scotland with responsible, reliable international observers to make sure that there's no jiggery-pokery, as was suspected in 2014. So although it looks like there's a lot to be done, it is not a difficult process because the majority of the population of Scotland would be 4 square behind John Swinney. So he gets together a team and he allows that team of experienced, capable people dedicated to independence with a political hinterland of straining every sinew to get independence. He gets that group to nominate their leadership so that you've got the Scottish Government running the country on the one hand, and separately you've got the rejuvenated, yes, 2014, but brought up to date, learning from the mistakes of the past, but making damn sure that everybody that wants independence knows that there is a campaign up and running and that this time we're going to get it right and we're bringing everybody together under one umbrella because the only thing that matters is independence, nothing less.
Absolutely, 100%. Last week, Terry, we did as we do practically every other week, we showed the latest opinion polling, which once again, as it has done for the last 3 or 4 years, shows that in Scotland, that there's 50% plus, anywhere between 52 and 59% we've had over the years in favour of independence, and the SNP lagging somewhere behind. But if there's this majority, and it can't be any more, it definitely is a majority now. One, it would grow, we know that. Why, if you believe in independence, wouldn't you accept this motion, implement this motion, and go for it?
It's not about whether the people would accept it. People would accept it, people would run with it, people would be excited about it. It's not about the people here.
Well, I know, that's what I mean. Their leadership, why wouldn't they go for it? Why wouldn't they do it?
Why would the leadership not go for it?
Yeah.
Right, well, why wouldn't they go for it? Because it involved things that they're not standing for. I loved when Eva talked about it, and it was so clear and precise, and I could see how Swinney could get there. But that would be a fantasy world. That's not going to happen. It's never happened in the past with them. They've never moved 3 steps forward. It's always been backwards. It's always only been about the SNP. The idea that the SNP would suddenly say things like, oh, let's embrace the smaller parties and include them into this discussion, this plan forward. They won't do it. They won't do anything that encourages us to go forward. They will put obstacles in the way because they need to maintain their status quo and not what we want, because what we want is far too frightening for the SNP. It means that we have to create a country that is standing on its own 2 feet with all its own rules and all its own money and all the rest of the stuff, and the SNP can't do it. For Christ's sake, their independence fund, their independence bank is now £110 million in the red, and it's a joke. The whole thing is a joke. The SNP are not out for independence, and I doubt that. Well, they certainly haven't been out for independence since Alec left.
I agree, absolutely. It didn't. But there's so much else going on just now, and that's one of the things the politicians don't really pay attention to as well. The elected ones, that is. I mean, if you go through why they failed, some of the major reasons that the poll tax, for example, failed was because they didn't consult with the people, they didn't run it through with the people, they didn't get a feeling from the street. And it was the same, for example, I mean, other examples are like the Loch Lomond, when that lot were trying to bring in some kind of theme park. There was no consultation, and the people went, no, we're not having it, because they weren't consulted. Yeah, Flamingo Land. And it was the same with the SNP's GRA. They tried to sneak it in and wouldn't allow people to discuss it. And it's the same with free ports. Now, the latest one that the Scottish people have not been questioned upon, and there's a call this week, as we know, there's a big government, they've accepted a government loan of 200 million guarantee to build a data centre in Lanarkshire. But the campaigners are saying, well, wait a minute, we really haven't debated this. Should we not be discussing it? Because this could go the same way as the poll tax and other things. If the people eventually get their hackles up, there could be trouble ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is all about the imposition of the will of the few on the many. I mean, that's what this is, and it's ever been thus, and that's the problem that we face at the leadership that the establishment allow in place, or if for example they get into place, then they're corrupted by the establishment and they don't do what it says on the tin, which is the problem here, other than with the few exceptions being Alex Salmond, HCT, etc. So yeah, I understand the concern generically as a principle, but on the point of data centres, there is absolutely no doubt that this is a growth industry. Now, how much of this bubble, because how much of it is a bubble, and my belief from my understanding of this is that it is a massive bubble in the West, because the two leaders are America and China are going much further. They're pushing further and further ahead with faster and cheaper AI technology and data centers. So you'll be able to hire rent the data center, because it uses the amount of energy it uses. Some of these AI data centers in America are looking to buy nuclear power stations, because that's how much energy you're looking at, and it may be the solution. So for me, it's okay when you've got a regular power source, but intermittent energy, such as Scotland's been imposed with wind and solar, is not going to do this. It's not going to cut it. You need a strong, steady, regular power source for a data center. You need a lot of water for cooling, and the amount of energy it uses is staggering. I'm using a data center at the minute. It's part of one of my projects I'm working on. And the money it costs just to power these machines and keep them cooled is quite staggering. And the demand is getting bigger and bigger. Now, from an economic perspective, the Western bubble will burst, because the stock market's too dependent upon these AI companies, and that will burst in the West. But the actual principle itself, do we want to rely on other people's data? Well, it depends who owns the data center. I would be pushing for it, but I would honestly think it is, as you suggested earlier, Roddy, to try to stop a data center is like King Canute trying to stop the tide.
Yeah, I think there's a hard way to stop. I got to make a confession. I'm one of the original people who had these data centers, not the AI ones, the original data centers that took people's web hosting, etc. I was one of the founder members that was doing that back in '98. My God, we were doing it then, and there was huge consumptions then of energy, etc., and AC for cooling, etc. Now it's even grander on this scale, Eva. But that's not my point on the technology or the bubble. That I think I agree with Phil. It's a bubble that'll burst. There's going to be an overcapacity. But my question to you is, is this just, again, the politicians ignoring the population? Because have you been consulted or heard of anyone that's been consulted in any of these AI data centers?
Like, this is just typical. How many times do you turn on the news and you think, I never voted for that? Who voted for that? Where did that come from?
Well,
Phil, you mentioned, or I think it was you already mentioned the GRA. It's the same kind of thing as that. Where the hell did this come from? There might have been a couple of words somewhere in somebody's manifesto buried at the end of something very obscure, and that's that. There's a really good campaign. There's good campaigns being run in very many places, including one in Larbert and one in Auchtertool, that Simon Forrest in particular has been publicising, and it would be good if folk could keep an eye on and support those, because this should be about democracy. What do the people need? What do the people want? What is Scotland? Scotland is currently North Britain, if you like. Well, it's not even North, according to the current Prime Minister, but if Scotland considers herself to be a democracy, if John Swinney considers that what happens in Scotland happens to better, or happens for the betterment of the majority of the population, then the views of the majority of the population need to be obtained. Those have not been obtained in respect to these data centres, so there has to be consultation, but not the kind of consultation that has happened in the past where other types of legislation, such as the more controversial issues, gender recognition reform being one of them, another being, for example, the named person or the deposit return scheme and the like, because there's consultation and there's consultation. And what a lot of people who are engaged with some of these debates don't want to be doing, and quite frankly, I don't think should be doing, is required to complete an online questionnaire narrating their views so that a couple of civil servants can collate them and write an analysis that summarises the concerns that have been expressed in the consultation, because those consultations done in that fashion are not normally representative. So what the Scottish Government should do is moratorium, call a halt, put it all on ice just now, and then listen to the folk from Auchtertool, Larbert, Lanarkshire, all of those who have expressed an interest and those who have expressed a concern, and organise quickly and properly a series of public meetings where politicians, civil servants, technicians, and those who are promoting the centres, those who are behind them, are in front of the public and required to be accountable and give explanations about what they're proposing and what they are not, what the benefits might be and what the disadvantages are. And once all of that information has been gathered, then there can be sensible discussions and decisions made that are democratic and based on the will and the expressed needs of the people of this country.
Yeah, but that's the thing. This is an autocrat's dream, what's going on just now in the world, Terry. We're worried about, possible third world war. People are worried about paying their rent, getting food on the table, just getting by, paying the kids, rugby or football fees, whatever it is, struggling. We're not looking, we're so busy, and then we're fighting about they're telling us immigration's the problem. It's all, and everybody's fighting among themselves, and then suddenly, from left field, oh, by the way, we're building this big data centre in your area. They love to sneak things out, isn't it? So, sneak things out on a busy day. But no one gets consulted. But this is a huge environmental and it's the usual promise of jobs as well. It's a load of nonsense. It's about making money.
Interestingly, somebody was consulted, and that somebody was the Duke of Roxburgh, whose ancestor was one of those rogues in the nation. Remember them? This bought and sold for English gold. I don't think this is English gold. This might be American gold. Who knows what it is? But he's already said, "Oh, that's great. We'll have it here." To hell with the rest of us that live here. Nobody's asked us. We don't know, and there's no jobs, and it's using energy and it's using water that we're already having taken from us. How much? There's going to be nothing left for Scotland. Nothing. How does Scotland benefit from these data centres? I remember years ago when I was learning about, I thought a data centre was these things, filing cabinets, right? But, and it still is for me. But years ago, when I was learning about computers and failing miserably, as you know, I said something about saving something, and they said, "Oh, just save it to the cloud." And I went, "What's that then? What?" They said, "The cloud." And I went, "The cloud? Like the cloud?" they said, yeah. And I didn't know where the cloud was. Now I know where the cloud was. The cloud's these bloody data centres. What a surprise that was to me. A revelation to Terry about computers and these massive, massive buildings that are going to use all that energy, all that water, and not give anybody any jobs or any benefit other than the people who own them. What's his name? Knopfler and all these Bezos and all these sort of people get money every time I put something to the cloud. I've not put an end to the cloud ever again as long as I live, wherever it is. It's not happening.
Right.
We don't benefit from it. People, there is benefit. There's no question. The Chinese, I'm all for China's my favourite at the minute. So Chinese, yes, give them, but we don't want them. And where they're putting them, there's a huge lodge across the south of Scotland. All these beautiful, beautiful places, the Lammermuirs, are going to be hidden from view by data centres. There'll be nowhere to go in Scotland to go, oh, look at the beautiful scenery. We'll be going around going, oh, do you want to go and see a wee data centre today? That'll be nice. We'll go for a wee tour round about it. And in fact, we'll duke up to Torness at the same time and go see that too. Why not? What a day out that was. No more of this. Ask the people what we want and tell them what we're going to benefit from if we go for it. Tell us what's available, what we get, and why it's worth it. And if it's not worth it, we say no. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Terry, let me just say, the only cloud you need to worry about is you know where McLeod is. Boom, boom. Thank you very much. Thank you. But on that, ladies and gentlemen, think about, one thing, the difference between dependent and independent. The profits in this data centre, if it gets built, all the profits will go to some offshore company, no doubt, some company that's registered down in London or in San Francisco or Washington. We were independent and say, we might decide, yeah, okay, we'll have one of your artificial intelligence data centres, but here's what's going to happen. You're going to register it as a company in Scotland. You're going to have to pay your taxes here, your VAT, and there's a certain rules on who helps you assemble it, where you get your equipment from to get there. And there's a benefit then to Scotland. There's a benefit then if we're taxing any profit they're making. As long as we're in that union, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing coming out of it. And their favourite trick, as we saw during the general election, Phil, is for them to promise jobs. They're doing the same with the nuclear. Oh, you'll get 10 million jobs in Scotland. There's only 5.2 million for if you build nuclear power stations. And remember, vote Labour. Well, one, we'll keep your jobs safe in Grangemouth. We're going to pay the WASPy women, and most of all, we're going to create 1,000 jobs up there in Aberdeen with GB Energy. The truth's coming out. There's only been 130 jobs, and 2/3 of them, or 1/3 of them, are outside of Scotland. The thousands never going to reach. So they lie when that happens. They always lie, pretending there's jobs. There never is, Phil. Or at least not as many as they say, or at the pay they said they would get.
No, that's never going to happen, and it's a con game. I mean, I think there's some like 53 full-time staff at GB Energy now, only 13 of whom are based in Aberdeen. When Labour said it would be headquartered in Aberdeen instead, and they said it will be over 1,000 jobs as the another. We know it's a Labour lie. Why do we know? Because Anis Sarwar said it. That's why we know it's a lie. They read my lips, no austerity. I mean, there'll be no austerity under a Labour government. You're a liar. Anis Sarwar, Labour, you lie. The problem is the SNP and the rest of the politicians are also joining that game, lying to the people instead of. We need some truth speakers. Desperately need some truth speakers. So yeah, should we be wary of jobs promised for data centres, for anything, house building, everything? Everything is. You cannot. It goes full circle. Oh, I laughed when Eva was saying if John Swimmy cared about the will of the membership of the people of Scotland, if Eva said, and I'm thinking, if Manny had Boz, she'd be my uncle,
Man, nowadays, maybe not.
This comes full swelter. it comes full circle. To always come back to one thing, and it's what most people watching and most people should be thinking about and understanding. The only way you can get country that you want with the values that you hold dear is to take control of your own future. Take control of your own destiny. Stand up, be counted, and unify around the cause for independence, nothing less, and then we can live in a Scotland we get proud of instead of these constant lies, shenanigans, and people trying to pull the wool over our eyes. Because you know what? I'm sick of it too, like Terry is. It's time, it really is long overdue. We need politicians with a backbone to unify within the SNP, within the Greens, and stand up and be counted. This goes back to this initiative for conference at SNP. Make sure you find those who back it, be clear about who opposes you, and take them down. Stand up against them, unify within the SNP, and take down those that are stopping you. Because you represent friends in the SNP, friends in the Green Party. You represent the will of the people of Scotland within parties that are recognised across Scotland. Yeah, the smaller parties, we've all got our ideas and we're true to it as well. But the problem is, and the ones that have power currently are SNP and to a lesser degree the Greens. So use that power. And that's those of you who have stayed silent, who've watched this happen, who've watched the undermining of the core principle of primarily the SNP, the raison d'etre, which was of course independence. It's time to stand up, unify with those who really want this, and persuade those who've turned, who've started walking down that other road, get them back online, unify, and get us the hell out of this union of unequals.
Yeah. As the clock's kicking on, I want to sort of put two questions. One, that one there, you know, the jobs that does. And one of the reasons why we get that all the time is because, you know, the foreign-owned media in Scotland will promote it. They'll promote anything they're told. You know, they're promoting nuclear, they're promoting these data centres, you know, they promote the Reform Party. And really, eventually, it does come back to bite, because this week we also got news that the BBC in general is needing to make massive cuts. And one of the suggestions is that BBC Scotland could be axed, taken down, finished, and they would then just be sending the propaganda from Manchester. Now, I never want to see anyone lose their job. Let me make that clear. That said, they would relocate some of them. Well, they're going to pay them off anyway, so they might relocate them. But would we notice any difference in the propaganda that's getting pumped into the Houses of Scotland? Would they change their angle, or would it just get even more anglified? You're on mute, Eva. Quid.
Long time since I owed you £1. We'd see probably no difference at all. I don't know if the viewing figures would change much either, because I'm not sure that too many people actually watch BBC Scotland now.
No, they don't.
There are an awful lot of folk that refer to it as, you know, BBC shortbread or radio shortbread or whatever, because you just get so cheesed off of what's on it. No, I don't want to see anybody lose their jobs, but I wish we had a truly independent, representative, fairly reporting broadcasting channel in Scotland, because there are concerns with all broadcasting because it has a unionist bent. There's no doubt about that. So that's all I've got to say on that.
No, but here's a fact. There's some information to back this up, Terry, and that is that the BBC, you know, the question of its quality of its content shows that the figures are dropping, as Eva alludes to. Only 13% of the population now watch the channel each week. It's going down by 5% points year on year. The audience has fallen from about 38% between 2020 and it's now down to 13%. Now, there's a reason for that. It's the old story. If you don't put on what your audience wants, we ain't going to, you know, we've got 1,000 channels, but they're so hell-bent in promoting the imperial unionist message. Is it any wonder they've lost their audience?
I can't remember the last time I saw BBC Scotland, because I've blanked it. I don't want to see it. It's too not Scottish, basically. And when I did try to watch it, it was for the Olympics, and it was for a particular thing. It was to see the ice skaters from Prestwick. skating. I was very excited about this, and I thought, I'm going to watch this. Hooray! Could I find BBC Scotland? Didn't know where it was. I couldn't find it. Where's this second Fire Stick? What did I do with this? I had to phone my son and ask him to come round to find the channel for me so I could watch it. And it's the only time I've watched it in the past 15 to 20 years I've watched BBC Scotland, because basically it is utter kick. It has nothing to do with Scotland. And when we're presented with any Scottish things, they're always anodyne things, and they're always with, oh, for heaven's sake, you can't be doing that. It's hellish stuff. But I do have a thing to say about these AI centres. A last thing. If we get a Scottish one, can we make sure that they talk to us with Scottish accents and that they understand what the hell we're saying, instead of calling me Teddy or any of that stuff, or saying, oh, was that really, did you? No, please stop it. The other day I had, when I broke my car, right? And we'll draw a veil over
that wall was moving so fast.
We will draw a veil over what I did. These forklift trucks really race, don't they? Anyway, I had to phone the insurance company, and I was delighted. I phoned this English insurance company, and I got a Scottish lassie answering me. We could talk. It was so exciting. We were on the phone for about an hour, just laughing at one point. It was so exciting to have somebody, when you said something, they knew what the hell you were saying. You could say things like Glaket and Scunnut and Awaity. All that sort of stuff was going on, instead of what happens now with Alexa and Siri. I spent hours in supermarkets going, Siri, open such and such an app. You don't have an... Like this. It's insane. They don't understand me. Why don't they understand me? I used to teach English, for God's sake. So I want an AI centre that speaks English, and I want the BBC Scotland wiped off the map, and an actual Scottish thing developed to show us what the Scots want, what we are about, what we represent, our great culture, our fantastic beauty, and give us Scotland in spades, not an English version of it. Thank you very much.
Well, you say Alexa and Terry don't understand you. I don't understand you either, Terry. I gave up trying to understand you a long time ago. I gave up. Forget it. But the other thing, I don't want to, as they say, pee in your parade, but you get talking to a nice Scottish girl in a call centre in Scotland. All the well-paid jobs will be down south, probably. And all the profits will be going down south, and all the big money goes down south. And they give the jocos the cheap jobs. That's the facts, folks. That's where we live. I've also got to say, I watched MasterChef. At least I did till last night, and I started watching. They got rid of Greg and John. I can't go it now. But I used to watch the BBC for MasterChef, not anymore. But on that, is it any surprise that BBC Scotland fell? I mean, this week, classic one for you and I, the Hibs, or if you prefer, the Spoonburners, the Jambos, the Rangers, the Motherwells, all playing in Europe. They don't show it. BBC and that, they don't show it. But they did show the Manchester United playing Fulham in a friendly in Dublin. They did show Everton playing someone in a friendly. They show the English women's football team. But they can't show. We've got our clubs in Scotland, BBC Scotland. You would think it just is typical. No wonder they're losing viewers.
Yeah, and it's absolutely true. There used to be regional programming, and you bear in mind that this is built in Scotland. It started. This was, I think, it was 20 years ago when the BBC built this new centre in Pacific Quay. Okay, 188 million. It cost 60 million over than the original price, and since that time, the viewers and radio listening numbers have been in decline, as you pointed out. But bear in mind, this is supposed to be the people's media station. The people pay for it. Yet it serves the same masters that control our politicians. So many questions. One of them you've raised. Why is this investment in Scotland with its relaxation pods and Why and all of the it's a fabulous building. Why is it not producing proportionately more homegrown drama, more grown Scottish programmes? Where are they're talking about making cuts to this place, and it could go, you know. Where's the Scottish programming? Why has the commissioning power not significantly shifted north of the border with that investment? Because it's exactly what you say. The main jobs and the decisions are all made down south. It's just like Scottish Labour. It's an illusion. It purports to represent Scotland, but it doesn't really. It actually represents its masters.
I was praising not so long ago the BBC, but actually one individual, Martin Geisler. And the reason I was praising him is because every time you get a unionist in front of him, we said to him, well, what's the legal and democratic way for Scotland to leave this union of equals? He would get them, say, is it a voluntary union? Oh, yes. So how do they leave? Oh, well, we don't want to talk about it. Yeah, but they do. And he kept persisting. He's been taken off the television, folks. He's now on BBC Radio. Work that one out. If you question the boss, that's what happens to you. Anyway. Another thing coming on this week, because it's all about, there's all a wee thread in this, folks, and it's about the corruption, the money going south and everything going on. And something that came out this week, Eva, I hope you'd have read it, was that the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary has finally come to the end of its PFI life, except it has not come to the end of its PFI life. Now, you will notice in the BBC story, it doesn't say the Labour Party of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, doesn't promote that was one of the biggest ever theft of the nation's wealth into private hands and private funds and the hedge funds was the PFI, Private Finance Initiative. But we're stuck with this, Eva, and people shouldn't forget. And this hospital, we could have built a hospital at every town and village in Scotland for the price we paid for this one in Edinburgh.
See, before we go into PFI, can I just slightly say, isn't it ironic when we're talking about BBC Scotland and the media that the television was actually invented by a Scotsman?
There you go, huh? And the telephone?
Yep. Yeah, PFI. I can't remember the exact figure, but the continuing cost of PFI for a wee place like Clackmannanshire is, broadly speaking, half the income from council tax per annum. And in the whole of Scotland, I think that the PFI payments are of the order of £1.1 billion per annum, something like that. It's absolutely phenomenal and scandalous. And what it means is that year in, year out, when councils are talking about setting their budgets, they have to take into account that there's a great big whack comes off the top that's paying what is almost, if you like, a legacy debt that arose simply and solely as the result of mismanagement by unionist politicians. And you would think that they did this on purpose, or to quote George Fuchs, deliberately, to line the pockets of their corporate friends who are the beneficiaries from this. So there are innumerable scandals here, some of which have already been exposed, some of which I'm sure we'll find out when it's far too late to do anything about it. But it means that councils are hobbled from the outset because of these factors that the currently elected councillors are not directly responsible for. But it meant that, in Alex Salmond's time, although these things remained in terms of historical requirements and contracts that had to be fulfilled, at least there were new and different funding processes set up and set in motion in the competent SNP years. And I know we're talking about PFI and the scandal that is and how dreadful that legacy is. That needs to be publicised. People need to understand just how bad a job the unionists did. They've tied the councils in knots for decades, unnecessarily hobbled them when we're going through and have been going through for a while a terrible period of austerity. And it's one of many reasons why council funding needs to be revamped. It needs to be torn down and started again from the beginning. But we've been saying this for most of my life. We were saying this before the poll tax was invented, and we know what that did. So there are funding issues. I think that this also brings into the debate the question of funding from Westminster that will be devolved to local authorities or to, in inverted commas, regions, the potential appointment of mayors. And you have to look at all of this in context. PFI, PPP, in essence, has been another type of remote control because, well, it was theft, but it was also control, because as soon as councils had to borrow to create the schools or the hospitals that were required, or anything that was bought and paid for by that source, they needed these resources. They had to get the money from somewhere. That's the only place they could get the money from. And as soon as, before the ink was even dry, the councils were then landed with that for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And at the end of that, when they were finished paying, the resource that they just bought and paid for or just finished paying for was redundant and needing replaced. So the whole thing starts over again. And I think that was a long-sighted, deliberate policy created by Westminster to make sure that the councils never had the autonomy that they could have had and should have had to enable them to do a good job, which is why they were there in the first place.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that all of that debt should be given down to the Treasury in London, because they implemented that policy, not just for Scotland, but for the whole of the UK, and they should be funding it, not the local governments throughout the UK. It's a scandal, and Gordon Brown was the worst of it. In fact, I can't remember, there was one job that was about to go with public money, I mean real public money, and he stopped it and made them go PFI, and it might have been the hospital, I'm not sure, but that be so-and-so got away with murder. The Iron Chancellor, Terry, and all these Labour politicians, and it was started, as Eva alluded to, the Tories started it with PPP. They give it a nice wee acronym, make it sound nice. And the Labour said, we're getting rid of PPP, which they did, and they called it PFI instead. It was the exact same. But it even just shows the legacy. Again, the profits went down south. The profits and the rent go down south, but the people in Scotland are paying the bills. It's typical of everything in this union.
First of all, I have to say, I don't understand any of it, right? It's money and it's numbers, and that's a mystery to me. Anyone who's seen my attempted tax returns would know that. However, dear old Gordy Brune, that comes up and tells us about the vow and all that, shut up. So, what's wrong with it, in my opinion, is the fact that the money goes elsewhere, that we pay for it and we continue paying for it. And also, we built some really shitty places. We had schools that fell down, ceilings that fell in Waynes, and we've now got the the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Glasgow, which is so mouldy, it really is the Death Star now. So, what did we get out of it? We got crap buildings and an absolute lifetime of paying for it. And they get the money. Who gets the money? It's certainly not us. It's them. It's always outside of Scotland. That's what I know about it. Not the numbers, not the figures, not the little nice generics and the little letters and things like that. That's all just a blur in my head. But what I see is what happens. And I see poverty as a result of it. I see bad buildings as a result of it. I see the Scots paying forever out of it, and other people elsewhere gaining out of it.
Correct.
That is not on. And as an independent country, we can go like that.
Indeed, and we do that. It's neoliberalism, and that's been the problem since 1979. The transfer of wealth from the public sector to the private individuals. And these are the same bastards that don't pay tax. And just slightly on that, we were talking last week, we didn't talk about it, we ignored the GERS, we made a slight reference to it. But here's the thing, I was just had a wee quick look this week, folks, and I was just going through some things that are not included in the GERS figures for Scotland. So, but the duty on booze for the Chancellor every year is about £12.5 billion a year, of which the majority of that booze is Scottish, which is the whiskey, and which is, of course, gin. 80% of the gin goes out. So, but even taking a percentage of that, of our 8.9%, oil, most of it, all of it's ours. 24 billion in duty goes to the Chancellor, plus another 4 or 3.9 billion in oil company corporation tax that he gets. And then there's the VAT collected for the country's 180 or 179.6 billion, which our percentage does not get into our figures, of course. And then there's for these another one I just got was vehicles, the VAT on electrical vehicles, 8.2 billion. Again, we don't get a share of that. It doesn't go into our accounts, just as a side issue. But on that, it continues. We've got that, but here was the one, you know, the unionists are always quick to attack. And there was this, now, I want to say this before it starts, about John Swinney, they're big stooshy about him going to the World Cup and going first class, etc. 45 grand business class. Now, personally, Phil, I think he could have gone, and in fact, I think he'd have got more kudos out of it if he had gone with the punters in cattle class and had been singing, you know, Scotland No Party on the plane and joining in with the guys. I think he'd have got a lot more credibility. So I'm not defending that, but I defend his right to be there and to take his people with him, because that World Cup in particular, with what was going on with the Tartan Army, it would have been terrible if the First Minister hadn't gone to try and get something else out of it.
Oh, I agree he should be there, but to be honest, he's not a man of the people. You would expect him to be a man of the people. I remember bringing the president of Albania to Celtic Park, and he wanted to go in and stand with the fans, and the security guys went, "No, it's not happening, mate." So there's a pragmatic aspect to this.
If he was from Albania, they felt right at home in among that crowd.
And so Richard Murphy's the guy you want to listen to about Gers and why it's not worth reading Gers. Okay, if you want to, these figures that you read, Roddy, it is a con, it's a scam, it's an illusion. So you're happy with the First Minister being there. Scotland are our people are our greatest assets and our greatest ambassadors. And John Swinney could have made a damn sight more than he did. How you make more of that is you get independence. You don't play their game. You get independence. That's how you do it. On the PFI, this is one of the most enraging things for me from a construction commercial background. When I look at PFI and the money that's been wasted and spent on this, it's absolutely staggering. You know, the first one came in December '95, Alt Course, the first Prism, procured under Private Financial Initiative. And bear in mind, this was started by the Tories, as you said, but it was the Labour that put it into public, started the PFI in November '92. You know, after Thatcher was forced out and just months after John Major stunned the country by winning a surprise Tory election victory over Labour. But anyway, that's what it initially kicked off in. But the Royal Infirmary in Edinburgh is a classic because that's set to return to public ownership at the end of this year. Okay? And it was like, it was the NHS are due to take ownership, by which time Consort will have been paid more than $1 billion in public money. However, the firm is alleged to have either put off maintenance work or left it undone, meaning that we pick up the bill for this again once the Consort contract ends. So, and you know, when you way back this first prison, I mean, the contract was let to in '95 by Fraser-Kinley Prison Services in Liverpool, right? As a project company, a consortium of Group 4 and Tarmac, and under the contract, FPSL, as they're named, is responsible for constructing the new prison and operating and maintaining it for 25 years. This refinancing that's coming around was successful because they went into construct, they built it, and after the first 2 years of operation, the benefits which refinancing brings to shareholders of this private company can be seen as the reward for the risk taken in management. But we reckon the 25 years, this prison paid for itself after 2 or 3 years. And the rest of it was pure profit. And that's the problem, the corruption, the greed, instead of doing this in with the public. We pay for it, they get the benefit, as Terry says.
That's it. But you know, well, they're kicking up about John Swinney, and I go back to, I think he should have gone a lot cheaper and maybe taken a few people with him. But anyway, what it is, But the unions are up in arms, as you know, Eva. Oh, it's appalling, terrible. It's even on the BBC National News. But hey, Starmer spent 60k in a private jet, to go to the Lioness, the women's final of the Euros. Liz Truss spent about 400k flying by private jet to Australia. Not a peep. It's the double standards as well that gets you.
Well, I'm a bit disappointed with John Swinney because I think he spent a bit too much, but I do think that he should have been there. But as you say, when you put it in context and look at what others have spent, Russell Finlay was shouting about this, and he must think we've all got zips up the back of our heads. Look at the amount that others have spent and squandered over and over again. Look at, for example, the millions, if not billions, that were squandered paying Tory cronies during the COVID pandemic for PPE that didn't work or didn't exist or whatever, and we're still to get to the bottom of that. And only a few weeks ago, Andy Burnham flew from Glasgow to Manchester at a cost of about £30,000. So everybody here's in a glass house, and they need to stop throwing stones because the public aren't stupid. John Swinney should have been over there for the World Cup. I wish, as you said earlier, Phil, that he'd have done more or would have seen more in terms of him interacting with business people and creating or maintaining or promoting contacts between the USA and Scotland, partly for the sake of business and good relations and diplomacy, but also because we should be building towards the future and that international campaign for independence that I spoke about earlier, that needs to be part of the comprehensive picture when we are fighting for that. So I think it's a funny old world, and probably the furore about this and all the different sides that have been taken, what's kind of been lost in all of that is that the ordinary voter, if you like, is maybe annoyed with John Swinney or annoyed with whatever the Tories have got to say about it or whatever Burnham has spent or Starmer spent, but it boils down to that feeling that is probably throughout most of the UK, but it's certainly prevalent in Scotland, that to an extent politicians remain out of touch, and that we are continuing to live through a period of austerity and uncertainty where nobody really knows what the future is going to look like under the union. We're looking forwards, unfortunately, to a winter when gas and electricity prices are going to go up again. Food prices are going to continue to increase. There's talk of shortages, not just the shortage of water in England, but there's talk of shortage of fruit and veg in the UK because of the failure of some crops as the result of the alleged drought. So there's a whole lot of things coming down the track towards us. So when you see headlines like X £1,000 spent on a business class ticket, of course you're enraged. But that's the point of it, to take your eye off the ball. And the ball that we should be focused on, sorry, World Cup analogy, but the ball that we should be focused upon is the goal of independence and how we're going to do that and brush aside the other stuff that can be argued about another day.
Yeah, it's all fluent. It's the double standards everywhere, Terry. But here's, as I say, the clock's way against us, and there's a couple of things I want to get in. And one of them is this. This was a headline in the National this week, which was that the factory got blocked, they said, so that the Labour Party weren't seen to align with the SNP. So all those jobs up in Ardersier and all that inward investment was because the Labour Party couldn't be seen to be backing anything that the SNP were in favour of. Now, the Labour Party immediately, Michael Shanks being MP, being one of them, say, oh, we wouldn't do anything like that. They forget, don't they? This is from Willie Bain, Labour MP in Glasgow. There's a long-standing Labour Party PLP convention. We do not support SNP. We will oppose the finance bill and lay amendments. In other words, if it's got the SNP on it, they will always oppose it, even if it's good for Scotland, even if it was good for Ardersier. They allow jobs and Chinese jobs and investment down in England, but not in Scotland. They want to lay waste to us, Terry.
I don't think Labour are that bothered about Scotland, to be quite honest. It's more, like with the recent election, and you've got these two blokes and Monica Lennon doesn't even get past the first step. Monica Lennon, whether you like it or not, she's the most socialist of all of them. But she doesn't get through. And then there's these two guys, and there's a big fight. Labour do not support SNP. SNP do not support Labour. They don't talk to one another. If they're seen on the same boat, then they're heading for the same result. Is that not the plan? That they're heading for the same result, and that result should be independence. Labour shouldn't be stuck with Westminster. If Labour was Scottish, it would be fantastic. If it was Scottish and supported independence, it would be the leading party. It wouldn't be John Swinney. And on the subject of John Swinney, because I'm really touchy about this one, they've just recently put Murrell in jail for taking all that money. Nicola didn't see that. And then we have John Swinney going off to the World Cup, spending all that money. If that man had just taken some advice and gone with a group of ordinary punters that had saved up to go, and he went in with them and they were all singing and dancing together.
Exactly.
Think about the storm of excitement that would have caused across Scotland. Oh, John Swinney, what a good guy. And then independence. It would all be married up together. And the Tartan Army and Boston and Glasgow, everything would have come together in one movement. Instead, John Swinney's put an evil big sweetie in amongst all that, a big hard humbug right in the centre of it all. So, no. But Labour and SNP and anybody else, SNP won't touch anybody else either. No. Alba wouldn't touch anybody else. It's what parties do. They do that. No, it's only us. We're the only ones that count.
Yeah, well, there's one party that is inclusive. One party only, I'm afraid, at the moment, the Alliance to Liberate Scotland. On that, there's actually the President of Mexico, who's a socialist. She's doing a great job down there. Things are improving in Mexico. She was invited to be a VIP at some of the games in Mexico. She gave her tickets away to a family of Mexicans, and she went to the fan zone to watch the game with the fans. Who do you think's more popular, John Swinney or the President of Mexico?
I can guess.
The President of Uruguay, who used to travel to work on, he wouldn't take a limousine. He went on the bus and public transport. And then when he finished, he wouldn't take a pension. He went back to his farm, and he lives like he's a duck farmer. That's the type of people that you want. People are in it for the real reasons. Now, the last thing before I go, what I've tried, this particular show, ladies and gentlemen, has been all about the money that's been stolen from Scotland and the Scots and getting funneled into big corporations down south. And these corporations get away with everything that's going. They're allowed to, steal, thieve, PFI, and nothing ever happens to them. Unlike in that horrible, your enemy, China. Now, in China this week, there's a case here of this was a land developer and a realtor like Donald Trump, and he went into bust, and he's been jailed for life. In China, when you break the law, when your company goes bust like this, or a big, bubble burst, you go to jail for life. In the West, you become president and you get the nuclear codes. That's the difference. But there's 3 rules in China. Quick one on this one, Phil. There's 3 rules. One, if you get money for deposits, you can't use it for leveraging more money to borrow. He broke that rule. You can't leverage the property that you've sold but still haven't transferred and use it as for leverage to get money. And I can't remember what the third one was. And for that, he's now doing life imprisonment because it ended up busting the company. Because in China, they don't allow the money to run the country the way we do in the West, where particularly in the United Kingdom and the United States of America, big business and the City of London and Wall Street run the show.
Yeah, watch The Big Short and you'll see the truth behind this. This guy, this was Hugh and Evergrande Group, okay? And it's financial fraud, inflating assets and concealing liabilities. So illegally absorbing public deposits, fundraising fraud and illegal disclosure of important information to play it. So this was the Evergrande Group, which was the biggest real estate developer in China, but hobbled by debt since 2021 with $300 billion liabilities. And so what did he do? He stole it. Basically, it's fraud, absolute fraud. So straight to jail, unlike Trump, who just he changes the law and gets off scot-free. Absolutely shocking. And same with the City of London, same with the big banks, same with the people that have assets stripped in the West. A rule for them, rule for us.
Yep, and they took everything off him. They didn't leave him with a free bob, because he's not going to need it in prison anyway. They took everything they could get, the asset, to get it back to the people who had lost. That's what quick one on that one, Eva. Yep. We need to do more of that. They did it in, what is it, Iceland, during they jailed the bankers and freed the people.
One banker, I think they got.
Yeah, whatever. So that, we should be doing that to more of these corporate thieves. Jail the bastards, I say.
Well, it comes back to accountability. And on the point of accountability, we thought when we were electing MPs to Westminster for the SNP that they were going there to fight for independence. Phil was, so were a few of that cohort with him. But one who seems not to have gone there to fight for independence has this week revealed a secret new plan. And it is, of course, Pete Wishart, who spoke the other day about why we must reject the Rosebank oil field development. Pete's secret plan is it's Scotland's oil and we're not going to drill it until Scotland's independent. So that fills me full of confidence that come the SNP conference, and perhaps arising from today's National Assembly, Pete Wishart's got a plan for a de facto referendum and does not any longer justify being described as the man who stood in Westminster to have his photo taken looking like he just learned that the free shortbread had been withdrawn.
Now, Eva, if you're in trouble, raise three fingers, thinking that Pete Wishart would do something positive. Have you been captured, love? Have you been kidnapped? Someone phone Matt, quick. God, give me a heart attack there, Eva. Terry, should we be jailing more of the corporate thieves?
Absolutely. Every last one of them. Put them all in jail. Hang some of them. That would be a good one. For that. I would like a spot of that. And Pete Wishart, come on. Come on. Pete Wishart with a secret plan. The man who wants to be Speaker of the House, waity, or Leader of the House, whatever the hell it is. I don't believe he has a secret plan at all. And if he does, it's only about him. No, jail him as well. Hang him in his slippers. That would be good, eh?
Absolutely. Slap his arse with these slippers. Anyway, time, the clock is beating as we get going. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll keep you updated on any medical progress with Eva. For that, I apologise for what she said a minute ago about positive Mr. Wishart, but we'll keep you updated how she is. We get her free. But until we see you again, may you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.